I was rushed into emergency surgery after collapsing at work. The hospital called my parents, but my mom said, "We already paid for his sister's cruise. He can wait." They left that night. When they got back, my room was empty, and so was their backup plan. Before we start, we've got some crazy stories lined up, but we need your help to keep this going. If you're not subscribed yet, take a second and do it now. It's free, it's fast, and it helps us more than you know. Thank you for subscribing. Now let's get into today's video. The first thing I heard when I opened my eyes was a voice I didn't recognize. "Mr. Calloway, you're out of surgery. Everything went well. We caught the rupture in time." The room was dim. A fluorescent light buzzed above me, turned to its lowest setting. My abdomen was bandaged under a hospital gown I didn't remember putting on. There was a tube in my arm and a dull ache under the gauze that pulsed every time I breathed. A surgeon was standing at the foot of my bed with a chart in his hand. The last thing I remembered was being at my desk, Wednesday afternoon. The stomach pain I'd been ignoring for 2 days turned sharp at 1:14 p.m. I stood up to get water and my legs buckled. I went down between my desk and the filing cabinet. A coworker found me. Then sirens. Then a ceiling moving above me. Then nothing. I tried to sit up. The surgeon motioned me to stay down. "Take it easy. You had a ruptured appendix. We got to it before it spread, but you're going to be sore for a while." I nodded. Looked around the room. The chair beside the bed was empty. The doorway was empty. The hallway was quiet. "Is anyone here for me?" The surgeon paused. Set the chart down. "We called the emergency contacts on your file. Your mother and father. They said they'd be in touch." "Did they say when?" "They said they had a prior commitment and would visit when they returned." A prior commitment. That's what my mother called it. A prior commitment. My sister Megan had booked a 7-day cruise. My parents, Patricia and Richard Calloway, were flying out the next morning to meet her. The hospital called them while I was being prepped for emergency surgery, and my mother told them her son could wait because her daughter's vacation was already paid for. The surgeon looked at me the way doctors look at patients when they're not sure if the silence is pain or something else. "Is there anyone else we can contact?" "No." He picked up the chart, left the room. The door closed behind him and the silence settled in like a second patient. I looked at the empty chair. I looked at the ceiling. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To think. My phone was on the bedside table. A nurse had plugged it in during surgery. I picked it up with my free hand, the one without the IV, and unlocked the screen. 14 missed calls. 7 from work. 3 from Patricia. 2 from my father Richard. 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. 1 voicemail. From Patricia. Left at 6:12 a.m. The morning after my surgery. I pressed play. Airport announcements in the background. Gate changes. Final boarding calls. Then my mother's voice. "Hi, sweetheart. The hospital said your surgery went fine. I'm so relieved. Dad and I are at the gate now. We'll be with Megan by tonight. I left some soup in your freezer from last week, so you should be set. Call me when you're feeling better. Love you." I played it again. Airport sounds. Gate announcements. Soup in the freezer. Love you. That was my mother's response to her son's emergency surgery. A voicemail from a boarding gate and directions to leftover soup. I saved the voicemail, not to replay later out of sadness. I saved it the way you save a receipt. Proof of what was purchased. Proof of what it cost. I put the phone down on the bedside table and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light hummed. The heart monitor beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse was talking to another patient about discharge paperwork. Prior commitment. That's what the surgeon said my mother called it. A prior commitment. Like a business meeting. Like a dentist appointment. Like something in a calendar that couldn't be moved. My mother heard the words emergency surgery and weighed them against a cruise itinerary. And the itinerary won. Not close, not after agonizing. The decision took less time than it takes to pack a carry-on. I thought about calling her back. For about 10 seconds, I actually considered it. Picking up the phone, dialing the number, hearing her voice, giving her a chance to say something that would make the voicemail make sense. But there was nothing she could say. The voicemail already said everything. Airport announcements. Soup. Love you. Boarding pass. Gone. 3 years ago, my mother had knee surgery. I took 2 weeks off work, slept on a cot in her hospital room every night, handled every call with the insurance company, and drove her to 9 follow-up appointments, brought her meals, adjusted her pillows at 2 a.m. when she couldn't get comfortable. When she was discharged, I moved into her house for a week and handled the recovery. Megan was too busy. Richard was no good with hospitals. I was the one who showed up because that's what I did. That's what I always did. I was the son who showed up. Now I was the one in the hospital bed. Same kind of room, same kind of surgery gown, same kind of pain when the medication dipped. And the chair beside my bed was empty, not because my family couldn't come, because they chose not to. Same hospital, same surgery wing, different chair. Day 2. A knock on the door. I figured it was a nurse. It wasn't. Darren, my coworker, walked in holding a paper bag from the deli down the street and a card signed by the whole office. Brought you a sandwich. Figured hospital food would be trash. He sat in the empty chair. The chair nobody else had used. It creaked when he sat down, the way furniture creaks when it hasn't held weight in a while. How you feeling? Sore. Tired. Yeah, you hit the floor hard. Mike caught you before you cracked your head on the filing cabinet. Ambulance was there in like 4 minutes. He looked around the room. At the untouched flowers the nurses had placed on the windowsill out of pity. At the silent TV mounted in the corner, remote still, in the plastic holder where the last patient left it. At the get well cards on the side table. 2, both from the hospital gift shop, both signed by nurses. You at the visitor log, clipped to the door with 1 blank page. Where's your family? On a cruise. Darren stopped chewing. What? My sister booked a cruise. My parents flew out to meet her. Hospital called them before my surgery. They said they'd visit when they got back. Darren looked at the room, at the empty chairs lining the wall, at the IV in my arm, at the bandage on my abdomen. How long is the cruise? 7 days. He put the sandwich down, didn't say anything for a while. Then, you need a ride home when they let you out? Yeah, I think I do. I got you. He stayed for an hour, talked about work, talked about the game last night, talked about nothing important. It was the best hour I'd had since the surgery, not because of what he said, because he was there. I checked the visitor log after he left. 1 name. Darren Walsh. You coworker. That was it. 1 visitor in 2 days. 1 name that wasn't family. The visitor log was a hospital document. Neutral. Clinical. A clipboard with a pen on a string. Every person who enters signs their name, their relationship to the patient, and the time. The log had pages for 7 days. Mine would end up with 1 entry on 1 page, the rest blank. 7 pages of empty lines where family members were supposed to write their names. Darren Walsh, coworker, 2:15 p.m. That was the entire record of who cared enough to walk through a hospital door for me. That night, alone, I opened my phone and started pulling up accounts. The morphine had tapered to a low dose. The ache was manageable. The hospital was quiet, hallway lights dimmed, a TV playing faintly in the room next door. In my room, the only light was the glow of my phone screen and the green pulse of the heart monitor. I wasn't angry yet. I was measuring. That's how my brain works. When something breaks, I don't yell. I count. I add up what went wrong and what it cost. Lying in that bed with staples in my abdomen and an IV in 1 arm, I started counting. The first was the insurance portal. I'd been paying for my parents' supplemental health coverage since my father retired 4 years ago. I added them to my plan because Richard's company coverage ended and they couldn't afford the gap. Nobody asked me to. I just noticed the problem and solved it. That's what I do. I notice problems and solve them. My family noticed that problems got solved and never wondered how. The monthly premium was $410. For 4 years. That's $19,680. I'd spent nearly $20,000 insuring 2 people who were currently on a cruise ship while I was in a hospital bed with staples in my stomach. I called the insurance company. The agent was professional. I'd like to remove 2 dependents from my plan. Of course, Mr. Calloway. Can I have the names? Patricia Calloway and Richard Calloway. And the reason for the removal? They no longer need my coverage. I understand. Just to confirm, the individuals will receive a notice about the lapse in coverage. They'll have a 30-day grace period to secure their own plan. That's fine. And you're aware they may not be able to find comparable coverage at their current age and income level? I'm aware. The agent processed it. I thanked her and hung up. First column on the ledger. Done. The second account was the car lease. When Richard retired, he wanted to keep driving but couldn't qualify for a lease on his retirement income alone. He called me. Just need your name on it, son. I'll handle the payments. I co-signed. Richard handled the payments. Barely. Minimum amount. The lease had 18 months left, and my credit was tied to a car driven by a man who packed a suitcase while I was being wheeled into an operating room. I called the leasing company the next morning, told them I wanted to initiate co-signer removal. The primary lessee will need to refinance independently or will reassess the lease terms, the representative said. He'll be notified. That's fine. Sir, are you aware the primary lessee may not qualify on his own? I'm aware. Second column. The third account was the pharmacy. 2 years ago, I set up Patricia's prescription auto delivery. Blood pressure medication, monthly refill, my credit card, my login, my email for the shipping notifications. The box showed up at her door every month and she opened it the way you open a faucet, without thinking about where the water comes from. I paused on this one. Sat in the hospital bed staring at the pharmacy portal on my phone. The cursor blinked on the cancellation button. This was medication. This was her health. And then I thought about 3 years ago. Patricia's knee surgery. I slept on a cot in her room for 9 nights. Not a comfortable cot. A fold-out vinyl thing that squeaked every time I shifted. I woke up at 2 a.m. to adjust her pillows because she couldn't reach them. I sat on hold with the insurance company for 3 hours on a Tuesday because they denied a claim for her physical therapy. I drove her to 9 follow-up appointments. Took 2 weeks off work. Megan was too busy. Richard was no good with hospitals. I was the one who showed up. I was always the one who showed up. Now I was in a hospital bed. Same kind of gown, same kind of ache. Same surgery wing, and the woman I slept on a cot for couldn't cancel a flight. I pressed the cancellation button. I'd like to cancel the auto refill for Patricia Calloway and remove my payment information from the account. The patient will need to set up their own payment method to continue deliveries. She can figure that out. Third column. I should mention something. I was never invited to the cruise. Not excluded, just not included. Patricia organized the trip for 4 people. Herself, Richard, Megan, and Megan's husband, Todd. She planned it for months, booked the excursions, chose the restaurant reservations, sent a group text about packing. I wasn't on the group text. Nobody said, "Ethan, you're not coming." Nobody said anything. The trip was planned around a family of 4, and I was the 5th member who wasn't counted. On day 3 of the cruise, Megan posted a photo on Instagram. The whole family on the deck, sunset behind them, cocktails raised. Caption: Family time is the best time. The timestamp was 8:47 p.m. At 8:47 p.m. that evening, I was lying in a hospital bed, alone, with surgical staples in my abdomen and a morphine drip keeping the edge off. Family time. The best time. I screenshotted the photo, not to share, not to argue, to remember. I found out later, through Megan during an argument, that Richard almost called me from the cruise. Third night. He went to the upper deck alone after dinner. The ship was somewhere off the coast of Cozumel. Stars out. The ocean flat and black. He stood at the railing with his phone in his hand. Pulled up my number. Stared at the screen. 2 minutes. That's how long he stood there. 2 minutes of looking at his son's name on a phone while his son lay in a hospital 3,000 miles away. 2 minutes of thinking about it, weighing it, considering whether the phone call was worth the disruption to his evening. He put the phone in his pocket, went back to the dining room, ordered coffee, talked about the excursion planned for the next morning. He almost called, which means he stood on that deck, thought about me. He felt something pull at him, and decided the pull wasn't strong enough to interrupt dessert. Almost is worse than nothing. Nothing means you forgot. Almost means you remembered and chose not to. Day 5. The doctor cleared me for discharge. Do you have someone picking you up? Yes. The discharge nurse came in with paperwork. She'd been on shift the night I arrived. Mr. Calloway, I need to update your file before you leave. We have Patricia and Richard Calloway as emergency contacts. Are those still current? I looked at her. Remove them both. She paused, pen hovering. Would you like to add someone else? Darren Walsh, I'll give you the number. She wrote it down without asking why. Nurses see enough to know when a patient changes emergency contacts. The question isn't medical. It's personal. And the answer is usually a story she doesn't need to hear. Darren pulled up to the hospital entrance at 10 a.m. I walked out in my work pants and a loose t-shirt, carrying a plastic bag with my belongings. My abdomen pulled with every step. The automatic doors closed behind me. Darren didn't say much on the ride home. He carried my bag up to my apartment. Put it on the counter. Looked around. You got food? I'll order something. I'll check on you tomorrow. Thanks, Darren. He nodded and left. I stood in my apartment alone. 5 days after emergency surgery, I was home. Not because my family brought me home, because a coworker drove across town on his lunch break. I sat on the couch, pressed a pillow against my incision. The apartment was quiet, clean, exactly the way I left it the morning I collapsed at work, except now there was a plastic bag on the counter and a scar forming under the bandage. I looked at the freezer. Patricia's soup was in there, frozen in a container with her handwriting on the lid. My name. A date. She made soup before leaving for the Caribbean. That was her contribution. A quart of soup and a voicemail. I didn't open the freezer. I picked up my phone instead. There were 2 more cancellations to make, and I made them from the couch with the pillow pressed against my stomach. The home security system, the streaming accounts. Small things. But small things add up the same way small favors do. You don't notice them until they're gone. By the time I put the phone down, every system I'd built for my family was either canceled or in the process of shutting down. 4 years of invisible labor, disconnected in 5 days. The math took longer to build than it did to erase. 2 days later, the cruise ended. Patricia, Richard, Megan, and Todd flew home. Tanned, rested, carry-on bags with duty-free perfume and vacation souvenirs. They drove straight from the airport to the hospital. Patricia texted Megan on the way. We'll stop by and see Ethan first, then go home and unpack. They walked into the hospital at 4:15 p.m. The lobby smelled like hand sanitizer and floor wax. Patricia was carrying a gift bag from the cruise port. Seashells inside. A magnet that said, "Wish you were here." She'd bought it at a gift shop on day 2, while I was staring at a ceiling and waiting for the morphine to cycle. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor, walked down the hallway, found my room. The bed was stripped. Fresh sheets folded at the foot for the next patient. The IV stand was pushed against the wall. The whiteboard where a nurse had written my name and my surgeon's name and my medication schedule had been wiped clean. The room was empty the way rooms are empty when someone has been gone long enough that the building moved on without them. Patricia stopped in the doorway. The gift bag hung from her hand. Richard looked over her shoulder. Megan stood behind them with her phone half raised, like she'd been about to take a photo of the reunion and now had nothing to photograph. "Excuse me," Patricia said to a passing nurse. "My son was in this room. Ethan Calloway." The nurse checked the system. "Mr. Calloway was discharged 2 days ago." "Discharged? By who?" "He signed himself out. Called a cab." "Did he leave a message? A note? Anything?" "No, ma'am. He just left." Patricia stood in the empty room holding a gift bag with seashells and a magnet that said, "Wish you were here." The room smelled like disinfectant and fresh linen. The chair beside the bed, the one nobody sat in for 7 days, was tucked neatly against the wall. A nurse had positioned it there perfectly, the way you arrange furniture in a room that no longer has an occupant. Patricia called my phone. 5 rings. Voicemail. She called again. Same thing. 3 more times in the hallway. Each call went to voicemail, and each time the automated voice said, "Please leave a message." Patricia's face changed a little more. She was used to me answering. She was used to me being available. The phone ringing into nothing was a sound she'd never associated with her son. Megan tried from her phone. Nothing. Richard didn't try. Yet he stood in the hallway looking at the floor with his hands in his pockets. The posture of a man who knew he was wrong the moment he boarded the plane and chose 7 days of pretending he wasn't. They drove to my apartment. Knocked. I was inside. I could hear my mother's knuckles on the door. "Ethan, open the door. We just got back. We came straight from the hospital." I didn't move. "Ethan, please. We brought you something from the trip." Something from the trip. A souvenir. From the vacation they took instead of visiting me in the hospital. She was standing at my door offering me a gift from the place she chose over my surgery. Megan's voice. "Ethan, we know you're in there. Just let us in. We can talk about this." Richard's silence, which was its own kind of sound. I didn't open the door, not because I was angry, not because there was nothing on the other side of that door I needed. They stood there for 10 minutes. Then I heard the elevator. Then nothing. That evening, Patricia called my aunt, her sister. I heard about it later. "We just got back and Ethan is being impossible. He won't answer the phone. We went to the hospital and he'd already left." "Why weren't you at the hospital when he had the surgery?" my aunt asked. "We were going to come, but the hospital told us he was stable. They said it wasn't life-threatening. We had the cruise already booked, non-refundable, and the doctor said he'd be fine." That's not what Ethan told me. "What did Ethan tell you?" "He sent me a voicemail you left him." Silence. "What voicemail?" "The one from the airport, Patricia. I heard the gate announcements. I heard you say you left soup in his freezer. And I heard you say love you and hang up like you were going grocery shopping, not leaving your son after emergency surgery." More silence. "That's being taken out of context." "What's the context, Patricia? Your son had emergency surgery. You were at the airport. You left soup in his freezer and got on a plane. What context makes that acceptable?" Patricia hung up. My aunt called me that evening. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know." I told her she didn't need to apologize. She wasn't the one who left. She asked if I needed anything. I said no. She said she'd check in next week. She did. She was the only person in my extended family who called and asked how I was doing instead of asking me to forgive someone. Megan tried a different approach. She texted me directly. "Ethan, this is getting ridiculous. My mom is crying every day. Dad won't talk. Can you please just call us back so we can work this out like adults?" I didn't respond. She texted again 2 days later. "I didn't know it was life-threatening. Mom told me the doctor said you were fine. What was I supposed to do? Cancel a paid vacation over a routine surgery?" Routine. She called it routine. A ruptured appendix that could have killed me if they'd waited another hour. I looked at her Instagram. The cruise photos were still up. Sunset cocktails. "Family time is the best time." Posted while I was alone in a hospital bed. If she didn't know it was serious, she didn't try to find out. She had a phone on a ship with Wi-Fi. She could have called the hospital. She could have called me. She chose not to. That's not an information problem. That's a priority problem. I didn't respond to her text. The system started failing the week after they got back. Richard got a letter from the leasing company. His co-signer had initiated removal. He needed to refinance independently or the lease terms would be reassessed. Richard called the dealer. They ran his credit. He didn't qualify, not even close. The retirement income that was enough to live on wasn't enough to lease a car alone. He'd been driving for 2 years on the strength of my signature, and he never once considered what would happen if that signature was withdrawn. He sat in the car in his driveway. The car he couldn't afford without me. The car he drove to the airport instead of the hospital. He sat there for a long time before going inside. He didn't call me. He knew better by now. He called me anyway. I didn't answer. Where Patricia's pharmacy delivery didn't arrive on its usual day. She waited 2 more days, thinking it was a shipping delay. Then she called the pharmacy. They told her the account holder had canceled the auto refill and removed payment information. She'd need to set up her own account with her own card. "Who was the account holder?" she asked. "I'm not able to share that information, ma'am." She knew. She didn't need the pharmacy to tell her. But she didn't know the login. She didn't know the password. She didn't know how to set up an auto refill because she'd never had to. I built the system. I maintained the system. The system ran invisibly for 2 years, and Patricia opened the box every month the way you breathe air. Without gratitude, without awareness, without any understanding of who kept it flowing. She called Megan. Megan didn't know how to help. She called Richard. Richard said, "Ask Ethan." She called me. I didn't answer. The home security system went offline 3 days after that. Monthly monitoring canceled. Cameras stopped recording. The alarm went dormant. Patricia called the security company. They quoted her $45 a month plus installation for a new account. She hung up. 4 systems. 4 calls or letters. 4 moments where a family member picked up a phone or opened an envelope and discovered that something they depended on was gone. None of them connected the dots immediately. Richard thought the car issue was a bank error. Patricia thought the pharmacy had a system glitch. It took 3 days before anyone said Ethan's name out loud. That's the thing about invisible work. When it's running, nobody sees it. When it stops, nobody knows where to look. They just know that things used to work and now they don't, and the gap between working and broken is shaped exactly like the person they left alone in a hospital. Patricia showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday morning. I saw her through the peephole. She was standing on my doormat in a cardigan, holding her purse with both hands, the way she holds things when she's rehearsed what she's going to say. I opened the door because I wanted her to say whatever she came to say so I'd never have to hear it again. She looked at me. At my face, thinner from a week of hospital food and couch recovery. At the way I was standing slightly bent because the incision still pulled when I straightened up. "Ethan, I'm your mother." "I know. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? You cancel our insurance, your father's car, my medication, because I took a trip? You were at the airport. I was in surgery. That's everything I need to know about what you've done for me." She flinched, recovered, tried again. "The hospital said you were stable. The hospital said I needed emergency surgery. You said I could wait. There's a voicemail, Mom. Your voice. Airport announcements. Soup in the freezer. Love you. That's what you gave me. I was going to come back early. You didn't. The ship didn't have good reception. Megan posted on Instagram every day the reception was fine. She stood in my doorway with nothing left. Every rewrite had been answered. Every excuse had been closed. She wasn't talking to the Ethan who showed up, who fixed things, who slept on cots and carried groceries and never complained. She was talking to the Ethan who woke up alone after surgery and started counting. "Can we at least talk about this?" she said. "We just did." I closed the door, stood behind it for a moment. I could hear her breathing on the other side, then her shoes on the hallway carpet, then the elevator, then nothing. She'd come to my apartment expecting the version of me she knew, the one who listened, the one who absorbed, the one who let her finish talking and then said something soft enough to let the conversation end without anyone losing. That version had been useful to Patricia for 32 years. He showed up. He fixed things. He didn't push back. He was the easiest person in the family to take for granted because he never made it costly. That version died in a hospital room with an empty chair beside it. Like the man who closed the door wasn't angry. He was just finished. Megan deleted the cruise album from Instagram a week later. Every photo, every caption, every sunset cocktail and family dinner and poolside selfie. The album that documented 7 days of family time while her brother recovered alone from emergency surgery, gone from her feed. But screenshots live longer than posts. The relative who heard the voicemail had already saved 3 of the cruise photos, timestamps and all. Day 1, boarding selfie, 3:22 p.m., 12 hours after Ethan's surgery. Day 3, sunset cocktails, 8:47 p.m., while Ethan stared at a hospital ceiling. Day 5, family dinner, captioned, "Making Memories," while Ethan signed his own discharge papers and called a cab. The evidence of Megan's priorities existed whether she deleted it or not. The internet remembers what people try to forget. She stopped texting me after that, stopped calling, stopped defending. The favorite daughter who'd never questioned being prioritized went quiet for the first time in her life. Not because she was sorry, because she was out of arguments. A few weeks later, normal evening. I was on my couch, recovered, back at work. The incision had healed into a thin line across my abdomen, pink and raised, visible only when my shirt rode up. Darren and I had lunch together most days now. He never brought up the hospital unless I did. He just showed up, every day. The way someone shows up when they actually want to be there. My apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet I used to avoid because it reminded me I lived alone. Now it just felt like mine. No calls to make on someone else's behalf, on no premiums to pay, no cosigns to worry about, no pharmacy portals to manage. The quiet was the absence of labor I'd been performing for years without anyone noticing, and it sounded like relief. I picked up my phone, scrolled to saved voicemails. There it was. Patricia Calloway. 6:12 a.m. 3 minutes, 14 seconds. I'd listened to it dozens of times over the past weeks. In the hospital bed when I needed fuel to make the next cancellation call. On the couch when Patricia's guilt trip almost landed. Late at night when I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd gone too far. Every time the airport announcements brought me back. The casual tone, the soup instructions, the love you that sounded like a sign-off, not a feeling. The sound of a mother who wasn't torn or conflicted or struggling with the decision. A mother who had already moved on before she finished the sentence. The voicemail had been my anchor, my proof, my permission slip. Every time I doubted, I pressed play and the doubt dissolved. Airport sounds, gate change, soup, love you. Click. The recording was 3 minutes and 14 seconds of everything I needed to know about where I stood in my family. I hovered my thumb over the delete button, held it there for a second, pressed it. Voicemail deleted. The screen went blank. The recording that anchored every decision, that disproved every lie, that sat in my phone like a loaded weapon for weeks, was gone. Not because I forgave her, not because I healed, because I didn't need the reminder anymore. I put the phone down. The screen went dark. The apartment was quiet. No calls coming in, no voicemails waiting, on no systems left to cancel, no family left to carry. Just a man on a couch, in a quiet apartment, on an ordinary evening. The scar across his stomach hidden under his shirt. The scar across his family permanent and unhidden. The phone didn't ring. That was fine.